Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton and Kelly Barner here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with a procurement leader and business consultant that has been deeply impacted by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but there's a ton of lessons to learn here. We look forward to a special episode, right, Kelly?
Absolutely. And, as we go into these conversations, we know a lot of our guests. Some of them are frequent returners, and we usually have some sense of maybe what we're going to learn. I'll speak for myself. I am really looking forward to learning over the next bit of time because I'm not 100% sure what we're going to hear in response to these questions.
Yes, that is such an excellent point, Kelly. So we're all learning together. We're all in this journey together, and we're looking forward to our guests' perspectives here. On a lighter note, a couple of program notes. Kelly, of course, these conversations are just part of some of the things we're collaborating on. We've got the world-famous Dial-P for Procurement podcast here at Supply Chain Now. Kelly, have you really enjoyed your work there?
Always. I enjoy all of it. It's been fantastic. We've had great guests, combination of video interviews, live streams, a little bit of experimentation with solo pods. We've got a little innovation center going on there as well.
Well, those solo podcasts, those I can't remember the stage name for them, but we've gotten a lot of feedback there. And, I love kind of that stream of consciousness sometimes that those types of content can offer. So home run stuff there. And for our history nerds out there, you got to check out This Week in Business History, where Kelly and I dive into some of the best stories from our collective past. With new episodes drop, Kelly, each and every Tuesday, right?
They absolutely do. And it's always a surprise what we're going to cover.
That's right. All right. So, folks, you're tuned into one heck of an episode here. We've got a very special guest. I'm going to take a few bullet points and just introduce our guest here. She spent more than 16 years in procurement and supply chain. She's managed to find savings of more than $170 million in her career. How about that? She's the CEO and co-owner of IPSM, the International Procurement and Supply Chain Management organization. And please join me in welcoming Maryna Trepova. Hello, Maryna.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Hello, Scott. Hello, Kelly.
Hi,
I'm fine now. Yes, and I am in safe place. Thanks God. This is the most answered question which ask people me, and I'm in another country in Portugal and can continue my job and continue my activity.
So that might be an important level setting up front before we get to know a little more about you, Maryna. You lived in Ukraine before you left to set up residence and work in Portugal here recently. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I lived in Ukraine and I fled from Ukraine almost 2 months already, and now in Portugal have a permanent residence.
So you're going to have to pardon us as we work through this conversation because this is new territory for us too. And I hope we don't ask questions the wrong way, just being upfront and honest here. It's hard, everyone with a pulse has seen what's going on, and collectively our hearts have broken for so many of the great people that have been impacted by the atrocities and the invasion. Before we get into that, Kelly Barner, and hey, Kelly, I know as my partner in crime, we're gonna work together through this conversation.
Absolutely.
But on a much lighter note, Maryna, let's talk about your where you grew up, and let's talk about those early days. Give us some anecdotes about your upbringing.
I grew up in a small town near Kyiv, so I still lived for a long time, for almost all my life in this town. all my professional life, educational life were connected with Kyiv because it is very, very close. And I said that my native place is Boerka. This is a small town, and Kyiv as well, because I love Kyiv very, very much. It is really beautiful city. And if we talk about my childhood and my young teenager ages, so I was very typical child. I went to school, finished school. I finished musician school, so I visited piano classes. And I like music very much. It is part of my life. I like ballet, opera music a lot. Thanks God, we have such possibility to enjoy music and different musical performance in Kyiv. I really like it very much. And I finished.
Hey, Maryna, if I could interrupt you just
yeah.
for a second, what's your favorite? So, do you still play music?
Favorite music. I like Latina. I like very much. I like different souls. For example, Sting, Celentano. So different kind of music, and of course, I like different classical music. Chopin, Tchaikovsky. Unfortunately, now it is part of. Unpleasant moment, I would say, connected with Russia, and also Mozart, Beethoven. It is my favorite music, which I like to listen, and also I like some light jazz, so different music.
Wow. Really quick, Kelly. I was just talking with our team yesterday. We had a little fun kind of an after work coffee session. We were comparing and contrasting our music interest. And I thought that some of our team members had a very eclectic mix of musical faves. I think Maryna has just topped that. That was quite a variety of different musical styles there. Can you relate to any of that, Kelly?
Well, the funny thing about procurement people, Scott and Maryna, I'd be interested to hear if you feel the same way. Nobody ever set out to be in procurement. Ever. And so while I will say, Maryna, you're the first person I think I've ever spoken to that went to school for music and somewhere took a hook and ended up in procurement, I am not surprised to find out that you are talented in something that has absolutely nothing to do with procurement and supply chain.
So,
Yes,
Maryna,
and yes.
So, thank you for letting me interrupt you for a second as we talked about music. Music's one of those things we love talking about here. You were about to share a few other anecdotes of your upbringing growing up in Kyiv. So tell us more about that.
When I finished the school, I went to economic university, Kyiv Economic University, and it was economic and management faculty. So I'm educated economical professional, I would say. Yes, I have a Bachelor of Economy and Master of Economy, and I tried myself in different profession, in different spheres. Really, I searching for myself for a long time, and before procurement, I worked many years in marketing and advertising, in a research marketing agency, in advertising agency. So I occupied different positions, and I liked it very much. But when I gave birth my second child, I decided to change my style of job, I would say, yes, and go from transfer from advertising agency to the client. So I was looking for different positions, and it happened that I found one position, marketing services buyer.
Okay. So let's pause for a second because you've shared kind of the front end of your professional journey, and then a big segue, which is going to tee us up for the rest of the conversation. What did you love about sales and marketing, and beyond that, what is maybe one thing that role really taught you about the global business world?
I occupied manager of project positions and account manager positions. And before account manager positions, I was junior manager. I worked with Ukrainian clients and with international clients. For example, my first client was tobacco company Riemstma. Now they changed the name, yes, and McDonald's. So it was very interesting experience for me from different parts of this activity, really, but it was very different, interesting experience. And then I helped for local Ukrainian companies and local Ukrainian brands. So what I liked most of all, I liked to provide with interesting and creative results. I like atmosphere of creativity, atmosphere of freedom. So I like freedom in general very much. And also, I like to have results, to see these results, because when you work with the client, you can provide them with results and to feel this satisfaction that at least we have what client wants, or maybe just suppose this client wants something. So sometimes clients don't want what they want. Your job to help them.
And sometimes they don't listen, do they, Maryna? Sometimes they don't listen. But talk about results. $170 million in found savings throughout your career thus far, right? Kelly, I want to get you to weigh in before we talk about what Maryna does now. I heard a lot of passion and love for what she's done thus far in her career. What'd you hear there, Kelly?
I think the thing that's of greatest interest to me, and again, this would be a procurement thing, to be a marketing services buyer is a very special position to be good at for a couple of reasons. Buying services is a lot more complicated than buying widgets, components, materials, right? Because you're trying to come up with specs and requirements that relate to people. And there's so much more subjectivity there. But marketing services above and beyond that, there's so much creative, so comparing things. And typically, the marketing team in the organization, not a huge fan of procurement. So to be in that position, you have to be not only excellent at your job, but extremely good at working with other groups of people, some of whom definitely don't listen all the time. But you have to be an effective collaborator, and you have to be really good at the fundamentals as well as sort of the people skills that surround that.
Well,
Kelly, you're absolutely right.
Please feel free.
They don't like us, Scott.
Yes.
So Maryna, feel free to comment on that, and then we're going to talk about what you do now. Expound a little more on what you do now. So, is Kelly? It sounds like she's right on the mark, huh?
Yes, Kelly, absolutely right, and this is very difficult position and very sensitive position, and it is the challenge to be part of marketing team, I would say. Yes, to have the trust from marketing team, and it was the most challengeable approach for me, that they start to believe me and start to trust me that I can really help them. So it was my first task from my boss to get this trust, to earn this trust, yes, and to give them that I can provide them with real results and with real help. And at the same time, it was very difficult, but it was very, very interesting, because I realized that I love this job very much. So first of all, I understand people, I would understand people, and I feel people very good. So that is why I again back into the services and create my company to provide services. If you don't understand and don't feel people, you can't propose and provide services, and people will not be happy. And I provide the services for my internal clients. So I build very fruitful relationships with them, and I invest a lot in collaboration and in education of these people. So I talk with them one language, first of all, because I went from marketing agencies, from advertising agencies. I know the market very good. I talk with them one language, and I explain them many things, how I propose to cooperate and work with them. So, and also I were with them on different stages of the projects, not only in procurement part or tendering bidding part, but all stages. For example, I explained them that I can bring them value if they will involve me in the early beginning stage. And I help them to develop briefs and request for proposals to have very good results in tendering process. Then I spent with them on all stages of tendering process, and in the end, on the stage of implementation, I also were with them. So they feel my support and my help, and then understand that I'm not they didn't feel gap between us. Yes, they understand that we're all on the one page. And I explain my marketing team, agencies, all players on the market, that we are all one team, and we need to work according to the certain rules. And these rules like this. So I developed these rules, I explained everything, I go step by step, sometimes with small steps, but I had results. And like the recognition of my efforts and recognition of all these investments that I worked in a big international company. It was Japan Tobacco International, and we have so-called CIS team, all previous Soviet Union countries, and we worked as a one team. And I helped my colleagues to implement the same approach in Kazakhstan, in Russia, in Belarus, in Georgia, etc. So it means that I did something right and provide this experience to other countries.
So all of that experience, I'm sure, rolls up into a lot of what you do now, right? With let's see here, IPSM, International Procurement and Supply Chain Management. So you're continuing to do many of those things you just laid out for us, right? As you're in your current role as co-owner and CEO. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what? Before we switch gears here, what is your favorite? Can you give us a favorite recent result or a favorite recent project that really just epitomizes why you do what you do, that you really enjoyed?
It's interesting question, because we did different projects in different spheres, and for me the most my favorite result or valuable results, it is when client trust us and believe that we can help them. It is the most important thing in my job. And it doesn't matter if this client big or small, is it big or small company. And it doesn't matter if we have many millions results or tens, thousands dollars, for example, yes, or euros results. So it doesn't matter. And of course, we have many different companies, different spheres where we provided our projects. And I can just mention some of them in agriculture market. One small company, comparing with us Ukrainians, one small company couldn't manage with their procurement activity, so they didn't have even a procurement department. And CEO was very skeptic to work with consultant, but he was pushed by internal auditors, by owners to do something with procurement, and he starts to work with us. And after 3 months of our cooperation, he said that it was the most successful cooperation and project with consultant which he ever faced and had in his experience. And we increased the scope of our activity in the contract with couple of months. And the amount of contract was not so big, huge, but the impact was wow. Massive. And very effective. Yes, awesome. And we are very, very happy. And from other hand, we had another project. It was very short, but we did a lot because we helped the owners of big company from energy market, energy producer, to evaluate and help them to evaluate the amount of the contract and help them to prepare for negotiation and for Q&A process, for acquisition process. And we did this job very good. We calculated all elements for the contract, and our client was successful in this negotiation, and they get all KPIs which they had in this acquisition process. So I think that such results inspire us and inspire other market players that it's worth it, and such activity, such cooperation with consultants can be very, very successful.
Agreed. Success also begats success. And going back to your first example there, once you trust is a blessed thing. With it, you can move mountains. You can get $170 million in savings and beyond. And I love how excited that made you once that bond, that trusted bond was established. That's so important. All right. So Kelly, before we shift gears, I want to give you a chance to comment on what you heard there from Maryna.
Sure. I mean, in truth, it even goes beyond trust, right? Because Maryna, as you shared, there was a company with no procurement that was very skeptical of the value proposition. And everyone loves to be forced to do something by an auditor, right? When an auditor says, you have to do this thing you already didn't want to do, people drag their feet, even if it's not literally. So building trust in that kind of a scenario, Maryna, I think the fact that you survived marketing services procurement has set you up to be very successful at winning people over to the value proposition and truly the benefits of working through a formal procurement process. So kudos to you. Many other procurement professionals would not have been equally successful under those circumstances.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Maryna, I know we're just scratching the surface of what you've done in industry to this point. I love the spirit and the passion for with which that you do it. We'll have to have you back on later in the year. But let's talk about, we all know everybody and their brother and their sister knows what's going on, of course, in Ukraine. And It's a fast evolving situation. As you mentioned earlier, you and your family fled, and you're now in Portugal. For our listeners, share a little bit about how what's going on in Ukraine has impacted not just you and your family, but also your work family.
You all watch news, and you know that we still have a war, and we are preparing for the second stage of this war. And saying about me, I believe that we win, and Ukraine will be very successful and happy country. But now, unfortunately, we still have a war. We have dead people, children, and destroyed houses, destroyed infrastructure, destroyed companies, etc. So our economy in Ukraine decreased 45%. And back to my family, I'm here with my son, and part of my family still stay in Ukraine, because for men it is forbidden to leave country, and millions of our men stay in their houses or other regions. My husband in our house, and my daughter stay in the west part of Ukraine with her boyfriend. And if we talk about my working family, yes, my company employees, so we are in different places. Some of them left Ukraine, some of them stay in Ukraine. We try to continue our day-to-day activity. Unfortunately, the scope of our projects decreased. Almost all companies in Ukraine faced with this problem. And anyway, we continue to support each other. We communicate each other. During many weeks, we start our day with hello in chats, in messengers, just to be sure that everybody alive, and their relatives and parents alive as well. So it was part of our wake up procedure, I would say. Yes, first of all, you check all your relatives, then friends, colleagues, etc. And of course, for us, it's very important to support as much as possible moral in moral some activities. Yes, we have a calls, we support financial as much as it's possible, and we changed our activities. We stop our investments, and we decrease our marketing activities, because now it's not time for these activities. Unfortunately, we canceled our planned international conference, which we conduct every year in Kyiv. It's a big project, and we planned to do it. We prepared even before New Year for this great event, and many people were waited for this event, but now this year it is cancelled. And I hope next year we can do it and support all procurement and supply chain professionals in Ukraine with fresh knowledge and support all these people. So this is what our life, and we changed our focus. We are looking for international projects now, and we continue to support local procurement and supply chain professionals in Ukraine, to give them some information, to connect people, just to support with words and with advices what we can do now. And of course, we are thinking now how we will help Ukraine and professional procurements when the war ends, and when we can start to rebuild and renew Ukraine. So that is what we are doing in our day-to-day activity.
Maryna, that there's so much there that is a wake-up call, I think, for many of our listeners. Just one thing you mentioned, one of so much you mentioned. And by the way, I admire not only your bravery, but your optimism, right? Mm-hmm. When this war ends and when we get a chance to get back in there and rebuild, I share that with you. But, to start your day with a wake-up call to make sure everybody's still with us. That is such a sobering activity to do that most people will never be able, thankfully, maybe hopefully, and hopefully that we can stop that activity or the need to do that on you and your family and your work families mornings soon. But Kelly, that just will stop you in your tracks and brings a sense of reality that most people maybe are not familiar with.
No, it puts a lot of things into perspective. And Scott, better than anybody through some of the other work that you've done, it's really like everyone going through this situation is now a veteran of the experience, right? There are so many times where I might be having what I consider to be a hard day, and then I listen to veteran voices, right? And you think, okay, I'm going to recalibrate. I'm not having a hard day. Or I think I'm having a tough week, and I turn on the news, right? And I see news coming out of Ukraine, even the most inspiring things. The backdrop reminds you, keep it in perspective. You're not having a hard week. So it has been amazing. And Maryna, we admire the spirit of the Ukrainian people. Like, I can't tell you, those still in country, those abroad supporting loved ones and family members and friends in country. It's just been an absolutely spectacular thing to watch. And we share your optimism for the situation.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Thank you. People ask me how you can smile in this situation. But I say that we still alive, thanks God, and we need to continue our lives, support each other and support our children because they need our support, and we can't cry all the time. We need to have some stability and some thoughts about future. It gives us possibility to go further.
Okay, so Kelly, as I share on the front end, sometimes you just don't. As we have these conversations, these interviews, I feel dumb asking certain questions given everything else that's going on that both of you are speaking to. But again, Maryna, I appreciate you sharing all of that with us and opening the eyes of some of the folks that hadn't had the opportunity to talk with someone like you that's been personally impacted, but still, move on and get to the priorities of your day and keep your eye on when all of this will come to an end. So thank you very much for sharing. So Kelly, with that said, on something so much lighter, but also pulling the perspective and the expertise of Maryna here. That's part of the good news here, right?
Absolutely. No, it is. And Maryna, so one of the things that we would love to hear more about is maybe how what you've lived through has changed your perspective as a procurement professional. One of the things, and we'll talk a little bit later about, maybe overlap or division between procurement and supply chain. But one of the things over the last few years that everyone has had in their role is risk. And I would be interested to know how what you have seen and what you have experienced has maybe affected your perspective on scenario planning, right? There tend to be likely scenarios, slightly more likely, less likely. Scott's in a warm place. He's probably not too worried about blizzards. I'm in the Northeast, not too worried about tornadoes, just to use a weather example. Most of us do not work for companies that have a wartime plan. And so I would be interested to know maybe how your thoughts about scenario planning from a corporate perspective and as a consultant have been affected by what you've gone through.
Yes, it is one of the most important topic now from my point of view, and I mentioned already in my articles and my posts and in some recent interview which I gave to Procurement magazine. And I was fan of risk management and backup plans, plan B, plan C to create these plans.
Yeah.
And I provided always on my trainings and for my clients these messages that you need to create risk management metrics and risk management plan. You need to implement it. And for some categories, procurement categories, it is obligatory because there are some critical procurement materials or services. You need to mitigate this risk. You need to understand how you will manage this risk. And during last years, I understand it very good that this is key to success in current world. So maybe I just felt something, I don't know, because sometimes I can't explain why it's important for me, but I push this message to procurement environment, to our visitors of webinars, conference, etc. And I explain that it is critical and important in procurement and in supply chain. And last years, so it looks like universe prepared us for these events and showed us that we need to be not so sure in next days, for example, or months, and we shouldn't think that everything will still the same as previous years. The world is changing and we need to change our mindset, our activity and our behavior and of course our business according to this changing. So it means that if you don't have this habit to evaluate risks and this practice and habit to implement this risk plan to your day-to-day activity and to your procurement strategy. If you don't have your continuity procurement plan, so you will fail. Yes, and you need to have it, of course, for big production companies or big businesses, it is more important. But for small businesses as well, it is also very important. And you need to know and understand how markets can be changed in different situations and what do you want to do? What will you do? Yes, when you're faced with these problems. So I explained that this part of knowledge and activity is very important now for procurement. We can't think that somebody will calculate it, for example, financial analyst or credit management analyst or special group will provide us with this plan. No, you're responsible for your sourcing activity. You're responsible for your vendors and suppliers. You need to develop this plan and deliver this plan to all your stakeholders and all colleagues and negotiate this plan with key suppliers. And you and your suppliers need to know how to react and how to behave in different situations. So that is the main learning lessons which I would like to tell to our listeners, to your listeners of this podcast, and to all procurement professionals. And of course, you need to include geopolitical topics into your risk management plan and metrics. It is very, very important.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned those key suppliers, and supplier relationships have been so unbelievably important over the last couple of years. I don't know if you share my perspective. I feel like we've talked about supplier relationships for 10 years, 15 years, but we didn't actually realize and feel how important they were and start taking meaningful steps towards investing in them and making them real relationships until we were so tested by first the pandemic and now certainly the challenges that companies are experiencing in Ukraine. What have you learned about some specific key suppliers or about supplier relationships that also might provide an example for companies based here in the West that aren't under the same pressures, but would like to build stronger relationships with their suppliers?
Kelly, you are absolutely right. That last 3 years, these years are period of SRM, supplier relationship management in procurement and supply chain. So from the first week of COVID period, quarantine, in March, I wrote my first post in Facebook and in LinkedIn about suppliers. So I said that your first focus now, suppliers. So you shouldn't squeeze them, you shouldn't press them, you shouldn't include all penalties, etc.,
right.
which is mentioned in the contract. You should sit and talk with them. You should listen them, and you should ask questions how we can manage all these difficult situations all together. And what I saw in, for example, Ukraine and in many other countries, what happened with suppliers, so they start to talk with them, especially with key suppliers. So their activity, procurement activity, supply chain activity, were focused on relationship with suppliers, how to support them, how to stay alive all together with suppliers. Yes, how to have not disruptive supply chain, and do we have back plans as well? Yes, and now we talked yesterday with procurement professionals and with my other colleagues about what's happening now, and they say that all suppliers now so flexible. Nobody didn't want to stop the contract. They didn't include these penalties in the contract, and they postponed the period of payment. So they said they are waiting for payment. They cut it amount of payment for small amounts, and they said we will wait. Don't worry, we understand everything. So all participants of the conversation which I conducted to understand what's happening on the market said that they have very good relations with suppliers. Of course, unfortunately, some suppliers disappeared because they faced with bankruptcy, or unfortunately even destroyed in some eastern part of Ukraine. Yes, we understand that it is a war, but who's still alive, they understand everything, and they are very client-oriented. And from the part of procurement, company becomes very supplier-oriented. So this is the period of building and maybe supporting the bridge. Yes, if your bridge is not so good, so you need to making repairing of this bridge. And SRM and only now procurement and supply chain professionals understand what does it mean SRM. It is not only words or, for example, IT systems, as I understand in previous years. Yes, SRM, it is something like SAP. We do some activities with vendor management, etc., etc. Yes, we have data, we analyze the data. This is SRM. But real SRM, when you understand market and you talk with market always, yes, and you build your image of the customer, of the company with suppliers, and build this image on their market, and you invest in these relationships. It is the most important, because people doing business, and we cannot conclude people from this process. So this part of process will not be digitalized anyway. So we need to understand that robots can't substitute us in this part of activity. They can provide us with data. They can provide us with some conclusions and recommendations. But building relationships with internal stakeholders, with suppliers, it is the most important part of the job now and in future in procurement and supply chain part, from my point of view.
So Kelly, before you respond, if I could just add,
of course,
two lessons I think that we've all learned together, and Maryna is really speaking to. Number one, suppliers remember. So however you treat them,
forever.
they will remember, right? And then number two, I think as we've all learned, given the toilet paper fiasco of the last couple of years, you better hang on and squeeze the Charmin, but don't squeeze the suppliers, right? So two lessons to learn and living by. But Kelly, what else did you hear there?
And I'll add a third to that, Scott. And this is where I thought you were going. Deeds, not words.
Well,
right?
Absolutely.
We've talked. So we love our acronyms and procurement. And there was always SPM and SRM. SPM is supplier performance management. SRM is supplier relationship management. But that little leg coming down from the bump on the R is so small that sometimes we would forget it was there. And we would say SRM, but our deeds would be SPM. And I think that's really what has hopefully switched now over the last couple of years.
100%. If I had an emoji I could pop up, it'd be 100%. Lots and lots of 100%. Both of you are making such outstanding points. So Kelly, as we dive a little bit deeper in Maryna's procurement thought leadership, where are we going next?
So we have a couple more questions sort of about taking what you've learned about business continuity and keeping procurement going, really putting it into action. So, we talk about having risk mitigation plans or backup strategies, and suppliers are a key part of that. So we might say, if I can't get this product or service from supplier A, then my backup strategy is either to switch all or part of the demand to supplier B, which is a lovely idea. But in reality, it's not a switch flip. There are phone calls and processes and things to be worked out and money to move and all of those complications. What would you say are the things that we tend to either oversimplify about putting a backup plan into play, or maybe just don't think through until we've actually been in the position of having to take a backup plan off the shelf and put it into the game?
I think that you need to think about it. You need to develop this plan. You need to discuss this plan with all stakeholders inside the company. And you shouldn't close the eyes and think, oh, it will not happen because I think it will not happen, and forget about it. I know that for some people it is the strategy, and they did it, implement the strategy, and still implement the strategy. And sometimes my husband behaves like this: "Oh, it cannot be happen, never will happen." And when I predicted some events, he said, "Oh, you are switch. You predict." You predict many things, yes, but it's a joke, but it's part of life. Some people behave like this, and unfortunately, and I think that you're a professional, and you should act like a professional, and you should have toolbox with different instruments, and provide with your proposals and with your predictions and with your calculations. And maybe top management, maybe CEO think, this scenario will not happen, and we will not invest resources, money time into this scenario, but you are prepared. You have everything, you calculated everything, and you need to have it. And even if it will be some very small actions, for example, testing some samples, some materials, yes, or just started some negotiations with suppliers just to try to understand, can it work, and can they produce, for example, some materials to substitute existing suppliers, or even to substitute 5% of volume producing by existing suppliers. So you need to make some actions, looking for these potential suppliers, visiting exhibitions, visiting some marketplaces, etc. This is part of mitigation plan. Yes, this is some actions to decrease this risk, even if you have these suppliers on the stage of testing and negotiations. But it is some action instead of doing nothing.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe just one more sort of procurement operational question, Maryna, before I send you back to Scott for more discussion. You know, there's what procurement does traditionally. There's what supply chain does traditionally. But as we start working more and more closely with our first tier suppliers, and in some cases go into the supply chain to actually work with them, with their suppliers, how do you think maybe, excuse me, the ideas of procurement and supply chain, either from a skills perspective, from a benefits perspective, from a process perspective, how are those two practices maybe still distinct or maybe moving closely together? What observations would you have around that?
You mean how deep procurement should go in supply chain and analyze?
I think that's
to know
a good way to look at it. Exactly. Maybe what should procurement try to learn more about what's classically considered supply chain in order to be good at the things that we need to do today?
Very good question, because very often I start my explanation how everything it works for many people, for procurement, for logistics, for top management. I just mapping them all supply chain process and supply chain network. Yes, to explain how it works and how everything interconnected. And I explained that procurement should understand and know very good the early beginning stages of the process, and to know tier one. It is obligatory, of course, but tier 2 or tier 3, and understand very good all markets and all sources where it comes from, and till the stage when you see the final results. Yes, for example, some metal details or some coconut oil. So how it's created in the pack, this coconut oil, which you use for producing many things, for example. Yes, but you need to understand it very good, and which factors influence on different stages on the market, on suppliers of suppliers. Yes, and then you will understand, first of all, how to predict behavior on this market and situation on this market, and which leverages you have to change the situation and to bring the value to your company. Yes, it's not only about economy, but it is about the value. And then the most important, unfortunately, when we are talking about transactional activity of procurement, they don't understand how their activity influence on the final results. So they just see their part of the activity, but this part is very important, and they don't understand, for example, how their job influence on the final product, and happiness or unhappiness of final customers, or are they satisfied or not satisfied. So what does it mean for them? So they don't feel the full involvement into the process. And from this perspective, I'm sure that all procurement and supply chain specialists, they should know very good what they are doing, and they should understand how everything interconnected and how it works like clocks. Yes, these wheels in the clocks. And I have very good example in one project when these different parts of supply chain, they don't understand each other, don't understand why it doesn't work, and they had very bad results, and they have some spoiled product, etc. So they have some problems. And we just say the first stage of our process, transformation process, you just need to meet once or 2 times per week and discuss your problems and analyze the figures. So just week by week, you need to understand how it is interconnected and how different processes influence on each other. So it is very simple things. But after some months, they said, oh, we understand how it works. We understand now that we need transformation, and we go deeper. Now we hear each other. We changed some elements of the process, and we go further to the production part, and we want to improve some production process to decrease level of fails, products level of bad production results. So yes, it works like this. And supply chain, it is more than logistics. Unfortunately, many people think that supply chain is logistics, but it is not logistics. It is very complicated things. And half of a year, I wrote that now all people in the world know what does it mean supply chain, because they don't have their products in time.
That's right.
Yes, lead time decreased, price decreased. Why it happened? Wow, everything changed. Yes, and now everybody understands what is logistics and what is supply chain.
Yes, it is. The way we view it here, it is that it's more of the ecosystem than just, and not say just, but the backbone. Transportation, logistics being the backbone of global supply chain. So that's a great point, Maryna, that we love making around here time and time again. Okay, so I really enjoyed, and I've got my 18 pages of notes just out of view here from the last few questions and whatnot. And Maryna, thanks so much for your time. I got one question before we make sure folks know how to connect with you. Based on your experience, which procurement skills would you say are most transferable to critical situations, no matter of kind of the functional space where you may be a professional in?
As I already mentioned, that communication, it is the most critical things, which is very important. Like in private life and business life, it is very, very important to talk to people, and ability to listen people. It is very difficult. Unfortunately, not everybody can listen people. The second is critical thinking. So you need to stop, you need not panic, and to think critical about information which you get and about decisions which you need to make at this moment, for example. Yes. Then it is very important to have a plan. So ability to develop plans it is like not in critical situation, but to be prepared for critical situation. I think that many procurement professionals, supply chain professionals, understand it and make lessons learning for the future, that you need to have a plan. As minimum for critical activity, for critical procurements. Yes, and analytical skills is very important. So we have huge information, a lot of information and a lot of data, and you need to understand which information you need, which data you need, and how to analyze this all information, and which conclusion you need to do. So first of all, ability to work with this information, capacity to work with this information, and making decisions, making conclusions. And of course, we mentioned already about leadership. If you are a leader, if you want to make a position of the leader in supply chain and in procurement process, you need to have a brave, I would say, yes, to make this responsibility, to take this responsibility, and to make decisions, make conclusions, and make proposals to act or to react in proper way, so, and deliver your decisions. So this is part is not very powerful still in procurement. Unfortunately, many procurement professionals say, oh, my part is so small. Yes, I am very small part of the process. What can I change? Yes, and I listen, I hear it very, very often, and I explain that you can change a lot, dear my colleagues. So changing in small part of the process can bring a lot of value. Economy, yes, but sometimes and very often it is not economy. It is helping to keep stable supply chain. Yes, it is helping in bringing innovations, etc., etc. So leadership and your very clear and stable position and delivering this position is very important in critical situations, because you need to take this responsibility and to be responsible for your actions.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff there, Kelly. And I would argue a lot of it applying directly to procurement skills, but there's lots of broader plays there. Starting the first thing she mentioned is communication. I think we all take communication for granted so often, and I see it where I see it most is when we're doing problem solving kind of outside of what I'll call work. Spare part issues for appliances, for example. We've all probably experienced a lot of that in the last 3 or 4 years, just trying to nail down part numbers and dates and just specifics so that we kind of know how to simplify the problem, and then we can get to hopefully keep it small and keep the solution required small, rather than blow it up and all of a sudden in quick order you've lost sight of the facts, right? And when you lose sight of the facts, regardless if you're procurement, supply chain, or you're not even in global supply chain, you lose the ability to keep it small, keep the solution, and keep it to be a small headache. So anyway, but Kelly, that was one of my favorite parts that Maryna really spoke to. How about you?
I think she's right on about the procurement mindset. We think, oh, we're so small. How much can we do? And then you think about what we learn from an environmental perspective that, and I may not get this 100% right, but if something happens to the honeybee, everything on Earth falls apart. The whole ecosystem naturally falls apart, right? Little tiny, seemingly harmless, fuzzy little bumblebee in your flower out your window. If they go away, right? So even the tiniest little player has an important role to play in the overall system. I think Maryna's right. I think a lot of procurement professionals do think small. I think we're starting to think a little bit bigger, but we still have some work to do in that area.
Well, as cool as procurement's gotten, we can't use a honeybee example anymore. It's got to be more like the great white shark or the grizzly bear, or maybe, I'm just kidding a little bit, but it's really cool to see how important procurement has
Yeah.
become in light of recent events. So it's a profession with a lot more respect, that's earned a seat at the table. So Maryna, it doesn't do it justice. Again, as Kelly mentioned, we're big on deeds, not words around here. And there's sometimes you just want to reach through and not only give folks a hug, but fix what's going on, stop what's going on, so we can get back to those smaller problems that are still problems in the industry. And so hopefully we can reconnect with you maybe a few months down the road. But in the meantime, I love the work you do. You hit our radar when you were being interviewed for a big procurement magazine out there, I think. And I love that you don't, you keep giving all this. You've got so much to give, right? And as you said earlier, your charge is to be optimistic. Your charge is to keep moving forward, and you're helping so many people. So how can folks kind of tap into what you do? How can they connect with you?
You connected with me via LinkedIn, and I'm active on LinkedIn page. You can find me there. Also, you can find me on Facebook. I am active on Facebook. I post my thoughts, my recommendations, different information. LinkedIn more professional, and Facebook different part of my life, professional, both my private life and my thoughts about the world, Ukraine, etc. And if you like it, I will have your request and accept your request on Facebook, and we will in contact, and LinkedIn, of course, as well. I always happy to have people professional in any sphere, not only in procurement.
Well said. And, we're going to make it really easy for our listeners, right? We're going to publish some of those social links that Maryna has been speaking to. You're one click away by checking out the episode page. So you've made our week here, our day, our month, you name it. A lot of inspiring point of view and insights and disposition, really, from my perspective here today. Kelly, before we thank and say goodbye to Maryna, any final thoughts on your end, Kelly?
Just that, Maryna, please, let's absolutely stay in touch. Clearly, all of the distance between us and the difference in our circumstances, every single thing that you said about procurement today resonates with me. So clearly there's an awful lot of commonality. I'm thrilled to have met you. And I am looking forward to staying connected and learning from you in the future.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to talk with you today. Thank you.
Let's do it. So again, everybody, make sure you connect and follow and engage with our wonderful guests here today. Big thanks to Maryna Trepova, co-owner and CEO at International Procurement and Supply Chain Management. Thanks so much, Maryna. Wow. Kelly, so much there. Really. There's, even without the backdrop, holy cow,
I know.
Maryna's a dynamo. And then the backdrop and some of her thoughts there, really a jam-packed episode and conversation. And I enjoyed your take. That deeds not words thing. It's such a simple MO, but it's so critical and so universal, whether you're talking supply chain procurement, you're talking or anything else in life. So I appreciate you spiking the football on that.
Absolutely. No. And there were three things that really stood out to me. I mean, clearly Maryna is an exceptional individual, but as proof, I would like to offer up these three things, starting with the most important one. Her husband admits when she's right. This is huge. I know it was not the focus of our conversation. That is an accomplishment, but the fact that she's a successful marketing services procurement professional, I cannot stress how difficult that is. Building that trust, especially when people don't want to be involved, that is an unbelievable achievement. And then, of course, working and living through the circumstances that she and her family find themselves in, and doing it with hope for the future and a smile on her face. She is truly an exceptional individual. I'm so thrilled we got to interview her.
Completely agree. And an inspiration.
Agreed.
As you were saying earlier, when you think you've got problems,
I know.
put yourself in other folks' shoes. So big thanks again to our guests here today, Maryna Trepova with International Procurement and Supply Chain Management. Big thanks to Kelly Barner. Check out Dial P for procurement here at Supply Chain Now. Check out Buyer's Meeting Point. Check out Art of Procurement. A lot of good things that you're, Kelly, I'm not sure how you get any sleep in life. You're up to so much, but admire your work, and thanks for your time here today.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
You bet. Okay, folks, hopefully you enjoyed today's conversation. Hopefully you drew not only best practices and a different perspective on this journey we're all on, but inspiration from our guest. I'll tell you what, I sure did. So we're going to conclude like we normally do. But really, I think it adds a lot more meaning when we sit down and learn from folks like Maryna. You got lots of choices in this life. But on behalf of Kelly and me and the whole team at Supply Chain Now, we urge you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.